Hey everybody, it's Brant Frost. I hope you all are doing well. I wanted to take a moment today. It's the end of the day after we have completed our Rules Committee meeting, and I wanted to let y'all know what happened. A little background to begin with. Each of the states and the 6 territories, including the District of Columbia, sends 2 representatives from their delegation. The delegates elect 1 man and 1 woman to represent them on this committee, and that was conducted in the 56 delegations. And we are supposed to meet today, tomorrow, and possibly Saturday if needed to discuss rule changes, vote on things, etc. That has been what has happened in the previous conventions. This convention was a significant departure from that, and you need to get a little background to understand why. In 2012, the Republican National Convention voted to approve some significant rule changes to the Republican rules, one of which was a provision that allowed the Republican National Committee to change the rules of the party in between conventions, with certain exceptions. This resulted in a massive transfer of rulemaking power from the convention and the Convention Rules Committee into the hands of the RNC. This was pushed in 2012 by the Mitt Romney campaign, which was looking to solidify more control over the Republican Party in the event of a Romney presidency. Of course, Romney did not win the election, but those rules remained in place through 2016 and through 2020. We didn't have a Rules Committee meeting in 2020, so there wasn't any opportunity to change them. In 2016, there was a motion made by Morton Blackwell and supported by Senator Mike Lee, who was also on the Rules Committee at the 2016 convention, to repeal that provision and return that power only to the convention. The significance of this is that the Republican National Committee has historically been a lot less, shall we say, receptive to the wishes and ideas of the grassroots. A perfect example of that is the fact that last year, even though in all 50 states the grassroots wanted a new RNC chair, 2/3 of the RNC voted to re-elect Ronna McDaniel. It shows you how disconnected these people tend to be from their folks back home, far more disconnected than the delegates who are elected to serve on the Convention Rules Committee. So what we have seen over the last 12 years is a gradual concentration of power into the hands of the RNC and the RNC Permanent Rules Committee. And we saw that on very clear display at this convention. The Convention Rules Committee was not given any advance information about who the other committee members were, other than the fact that we had their names. We weren't given contact information. Now, the excuse that was given was that, well, we passed a rule in 2016 saying that information should be kept confidential. But nowhere during that rules-making process in 2016 was it said that that would be kept confidential from fellow members. There was no way for members to sign a waiver saying that I waive my rights to confidentiality, I'd be happy to talk to fellow members. That was never provided, nor was anything like a signal channel set up where we could communicate while still protecting the security of our emails and phone numbers. Also, I would point out that rule passed in 2016, which says that that information is confidential, was only supposed to be, it said clearly in the rule, for members of the Rules Committee. But guess what, folks? The members of the Platform Committee and the Credentials Committee and the Order and the Permanent Organization Committee, they too were not provided with the contact information from their fellow committee members, in clear violation of precedent leading up to 2016. So in other words, a rule that was only supposed to apply to the Rules Committee has now been interpreted to apply to all committees. Now, why would you limit the ability of committee members to talk among themselves and reach out to each other? Now, you can give all kinds of reasons, but the most obvious reason is that they want to maintain control. If the members can't talk to each other until they get to this meeting, they can't strategize, they can't run ideas past each other. And it's also a great way to prevent them from offering amendments in committee, because you can always say, well, these are new ideas and we haven't had time to discuss them. Well, duh, you haven't given us a chance to discuss them. This committee process has been very clearly orchestrated to prevent the convention committees from being able to do any real substance. And our job is basically just to rubber stamp what is handed to us. So with that background, now we arrive here, we have our orientation last night, and it's told to us that we have to submit things in paper format, written in longhand, which then the committee legislative council will then type in and put on the screen. Now you think, that sounds ridiculous. Why not just email them directly? Well, we have been emailing them up until 2 days ago, but then they tell us, well, you have to submit them in written format. There's no reason to do that except to slow down the process and to discourage amendment writing. It's a lot easier these days just to type something up, but if you're to write it in longhand, and in particular if it's a long amendment that'll take you longer, it just is a disincentive to writing amendments. So they did that. Now I offered a motion to allow people to continue to submit their ideas electronically. Committee members could email that to the legal counsel, and that would make sense, you would think. Well, that got about 20 votes in favor, well, a little more than 20, maybe about 30, 40, but the vast majority of them voted against this proposal. Now, why would you vote against something that would make your life easier? Well, most of the members had been chosen based on their meeting one of two criteria or both. They were old-time establishment people who did not want any changes that would make the RNC more accountable to the grassroots, or two, they had been picked because they would follow instructions given to them by the RNC or by the Trump campaign. And so this very common sense proposal gets killed. Then what do? Then they present to us a report, which we had less than a little over 12 hours to look at. Now, this is a report given to us by the Republican National Committee and their Permanent Rules Committee. Now, in the meantime, members of the Convention Committee have been preparing, have been studying, and have been submitting amendments. Among the amendments submitted were several to make the primary process more representative of the wishes of the Republican electorate by making it more proportional, less winner take all. Another proposal was to give bonus delegates. I submitted a proposal to give bonus delegates to Republican districts. If you have a Republican congressman, you get 2 extra bonus delegates. That was a proposal I made. There were several. Another proposal, which should in any other situation have gotten almost unanimous support, was a proposal to eliminate secret ballots for RNC chairman races. These National Committee members are our representatives. They are not entitled to a secret ballot, and they don't have a secret ballot for anything they do. They don't have a secret ballot for their budget votes. They don't have a secret ballot for anything except for the election of officers. My proposal was just to strike out that exception and say all votes are on the record. There should be no secret ballots. They gave some of the most ridiculous, convoluted, disingenuous arguments against it. But when we voted on it, only 20-ish% of the committee, less than 20% of the committee, voted to get rid of those secret ballots and have accountability on the RNC for who they were electing as a chair. I voted for that amendment to strike that secret ballot and make sure that RNC members will be voting on the record and be held accountable for their votes by the grassroots. I was the only member of our 2-member Georgia delegation to do that. Our other member, Caroline Jeffords, had to step down at the last minute a few days ago, so she wasn't actually able to participate. The delegation elected Ginger Howard in her place. And on these votes to allow more ease with the process and to get rid of secret ballots, I voted for it, and to the best of my knowledge, ladies with voice votes, Ginger voted against it. You also have another motion which came up, there were several other amendments that were waiting to be introduced, but then there was a motion to close debate and move straight to a vote on the final report which had been submitted to us by the Republican National Committee. Now keep in mind, folks, we have 2 days which we have all set aside to be here for this meeting. They allocated from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. for this meeting. Lunches had been ordered and dinner had potentially been ordered, and they had allocated 10 hours today and 10 hours tomorrow for this on the calendar, and possibly meetings on Saturday. So up to 20 hours plus Saturday had been prepared for this, right? Well, at barely an hour into the process, someone moves to close debate and to end debate and move straight to a final vote on the report, right? Well, and that motion's not debatable. Keep in mind, we still had a lot of good amendments that people wanted to bring up, very common sense amendments that many of you voted on when I surveyed you earlier this week, asking your opinion, things making it easier to introduce conservative resolutions on the RNC, making it easier for RNC members to get access to information, and eliminating the secret ballot for RNC chair races. I was able to get a vote on that RNC chair vote, but like I said, it was overwhelmingly defeated, and to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only one who voted for that transparency amendment. then we get to that motion, right? That key motion to end debate and get to the final vote and report and skip everything else. Keep in mind, we had 20 hours allocated for this. We're barely an hour into it and they want to end debate. They want to get it over with. This has never been done in the history of the Rules Committee and the Republican National Convention. Never been done in anybody's memory. And so they go immediately to a vote. The motion to end debate passes by a vote of about 80 to 21. It's just 21 of us who voted against stifling the discussion and just shutting everything off. Only 21 of us voted against that. I was one of the 21. Morton Blackwell was one of the 21. Drew McKissick from South Carolina, the former co-chair of the RNC and current chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party, he was one who voted against it. Several very admirable patriots voted against this stifling amendment to end debate and close off any further opportunity for discussion. Keep in mind, we've gathered here from all over the country as the representatives of our delegations. And the attitude that was being conveyed to us by the chair of the committee was basically, your job is to rubber stamp what we have decided on. And, we did all the deliberating. You just rubber stamp what we do. It was very clear. It was almost explicitly clear in what they were saying that is their attitude toward our committee and to all of you. This is the delegates who elected us, either as national delegates electing us or as state and district delegates who elected us originally to represent you at the National Convention. So it passes. They sandbag us 80 something to 21, and that's that. Again, I voted against that premature ending to the process and cutting off the discussion and opportunity to introduce amendments to the report. I voted against that. Ginger Howard voted for it. It was a standing vote, so we all know exactly how everyone voted. Then we get to the final vote on the report. It passes. Committee adjourns. Now, this is something we have to be aware of in the future. The good news is that the RNC has undergone dramatic changes thanks to the efforts of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, Tyler Boyer, the outgoing National Committee man from Arizona. The work they've done at electing new National Committee members has been truly outstanding. Over 40, I believe the number is 47, new members of the RNC are coming into office, and the vast majority of them are solid, great people. 47 out of 168, that's a huge turnover. That would be as if 60 Republicans in the House caucus, in the U.S. House Congress, had retired or lost their seats to more conservative candidates. That's a huge turnover, and it's indicative of good things to come on the Republican National Committee. However, this current National Committee, this outgoing one, was the one that set the table for this, including the very stultified process. Now, they're not the only ones to blame. There were other elements outside the RNC that were pushing them to do this. But the good news is that long term, we can look forward, I believe, to a more grassroots-friendly Republican National Committee, a more grassroots-friendly permanent committee on rules, where some of our ideas will have a more fair hearing. But I think we also have to be aware of how there is still work to be done, and at future conventions, we and people from other states have to be very careful as to who they elect to serve on these committees, because it takes a special type of guts and courage when the National Committee leadership is telling us to do this, when the committee chairs are telling us to do this, when even the Trump campaign is saying just do this. It takes a special type of courage to say, wait a minute, this is a deliberative process. We were elected to represent our constituents. We owe it to them to deliberate and to take ideas based on their merit, not based on who's holding up a sign telling us how we should vote. It takes special type of people to stand up to that. In that meeting room today, there was only 20 such people, 21 to be precise. Remember, courage and cowardice are both contagious. Some people think that fighting the battle is like water in a desert. You have a bottle of water in a hot day in the desert. You have to be careful with it. You have to pick your battles, because if you run out of the water, then you're dead. But courage is not like a limited bottle of water. Courage is like a muscle. If you exercise it, if you use it, then it becomes stronger and it's easier to do it. Many people will say all the time, well, I'll fight the big battle, but these are small battles. I'll keep my powder dry. Well, ask yourself this question. If you can't stand up and fight for the small things, how are you going to stand up and fight when a lot's on the line? Does the Bible say in the parable of the 3 servants and the talents, the 5, the 10, and the 1 talent? Does the Bible say, you've been faithful in big things, now I'll put you in charge of small things? No. It says, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in the small things, and now I will put you in charge of the big things. We have got to elect people who are willing to stand up and do the right thing, even when it's unpopular, even when it makes people say, why are you being difficult? And even in what seems like the small things, because from there, you get to the big things. I would say in closing that I just ask everyone, as we consider this and contemplate it down the road, please be charitable to our outgoing National Committee woman. She voted what she thought was the right thing to do. She's completing her service on the RNC now after 8 years. So whether or not you disagree with her decision to vote against, the amendment to have open RNC chairman's races, more transparency of that, whether or not you disagree on her decision to vote to end debate and stop more amendments from being offered and discussed, she served the party for many years. She's a very nice lady. I would urge you not to hold this against her as she's wrapping up her time of service with the Republican Party in this role of National Committee woman. It's a new future. We've got elections to win, and we've got many more conventions ahead of us, so we need to look to the future and learn from the past. The good news is we had a lot of good people elected this year as delegates to committees and to the National Committee. We got a couple of decent rules passed, like one rule that was give a bonus delegates for now the states that have closed primaries, which is great. There were a few not so good rules as well, no question about it. But the long and short of it is we can build on the success of this year if next time we make a point as national delegates of being mindful that our biggest responsibility as national delegates is to elect people to serve on these committees who will have the backbone to stand up and fight, even in the small things, and our responsibility as state delegates and district delegates to ask the question of people running to represent us at the National Convention, are you going to vote for people to represent us on those committees who will have the backbone to fight? Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to represent you. I hope this has been helpful, and we'll talk to you soon. God bless.